And here's your prize.
What's up guys, James from SIKKY Manufacturing. On the last episode we left off with trying to decide what drivetrain we were going to put in our Project FRS build, and you guys had some awesome comments. We appreciate all the feedback. If you've been following since that original episode, apologize on the crazy time frame between that episode and this one, but hopefully it'll be worth it. We're going to be trying to clip these off here at a much quicker pace now, and things got a little too busy and we got sidetracked, but long story short, we're ready to get at it and start making some progress on this FRS build. So after all those comments and factoring our thoughts into the whole build and what we wanted out of this car, we opted for an LS3 out of a 2015 Camaro and a T56 Magnum F transmission. So we felt that those they're not entry level, they're not budget minded, but they're also not over the top. You know, obviously you go with a brand new crate motor, you go with a SIKKY crate motor. Any crate motor out there, it's gonna be brand new, it's gonna get a lot more expensive, but going the used drivetrain route, this engine's coming out of a 2015 Camaro that was wrecked or totaled. We actually have a couple of them to pick from out back, so we're gonna check that out here in a minute. But either way, that's what's gonna go on this car. We're gonna chronicle this build, follow it step by step, and try to give you guys some tips, some hints, some techniques that are gonna make this install a lot easier for you in your own backyard or garage. So it's time to get at it. All right, so here's our three options. Got this orange one's a 2010, and the red one's a 2015, and the black one's a 2015. So the black one's got 32,000 miles on it, and the red one's got 48. So we're gonna have to, or 42K on this one, but let's take a look in here and see. Pretty decent shape other than being dirty. When we buy these wrecked cars, we always try to find stuff that's hitting the rear end, like this bad boy. So, pretty screwed up. This one isn't so bad. I mean, you could probably fix this car. Quarters look good. It's really just right here. Probably took a frame hit, but either way, didn't get anywhere into where the engine is, so we're definitely in good shape. That's what we look for, make sure the drivetrain didn't take any beatings. But either way, I think you guys can see that these would be really good candidates for what we're planning to do. I'm guessing we're probably gonna end up going with this red one with the 48K, or 42K I should say, on it. So it's a good specimen, good used motor. We're not gonna end up using the transmission out of this, but TR6060 is a great option too. You know, it's 6-speed, it's a little bit stronger than the T56. Even shares some of the components that the Magnum has in it, so not quite as strong. And the Magnum F is really cool just because it's the F body length, so it's the closest lining up to the shifter hole in the FRS out of any of these. So just like a Camaro T56 would be, just has to do with where the shifter location is. But either way, I think it's going to be the best candidate. So we're going to have to get all this pulled out of it, and do have a bunch of prep work we got to do to the FRS itself before it's ready for the actual installation. So we're gonna touch on that stuff simultaneously. I might even get this drivetrain out. We'll see how it works out and how the episodes fall, but we got the plan, so now it's time to just get some work done. All right, so those of you who have already done this swap or have been researching and looking into it might recognize what this is, but this really is the most difficult part about this swap. Or the most tedious, I would say. It's not actually difficult, it just takes some time, a couple hours. You're essentially just drilling spot welds out to get this hoop out. So we'll get this car in the air and show you what it looks like before it's removed, and then the process for getting this out. We've found a couple ways to do it, and we feel like one of the ways is the quickest, easiest way to get this done. So we'll check that out next, because this is the first thing I want to get out of the way on this car. This is what we're removing, bone stock. This is what the factory transmission was held up by. There's a cross member that goes across here. Transmission runs down here, yada, yada, yada. This little mini hole saw or spot weld drill is going to be your savior. This makes this job super easy. It cuts the sheet metal around the weld. So when we're all done this, what you'll be left with is just little nubs where each spot weld was, which are easy to come back and grind flush with the sheet metal. So we're gonna get started on this process, and I'll show you how we get this done. And like I said, there's probably several ways to do this, but after doing quite a few, we found that this seems to work the best. And this is a really cheap little spot weld drill. You can get them on Amazon, your parts store, but this is a 3/8 version. And you can even flip this hole saw around and get new cutting edges if you wear it out. So you can usually should be able to get all the way through with one tool on this whole cross member, but we'll count the spot welds and see how it works. There's actually 2 layers. So there's this little hump right here. You're gonna take that off, and same with this one comes off. And then you go back and get there's some spot welds that are underneath this. But it's not terrible once you kind of master the process. I like to use a small drill bit, like something like this, to go in here and make a tiny pilot hole. You can just crack through the weld, and then that allows you to take this pin on this little hole cutter or spot weld drill and go in there and holds that in there and keeps it centered. If you don't do that, this has a tendency to walk around, and that can get real frustrating. So, and I also like this real compact. Not that you need it, but you can see if you had a real big drill, you're gonna have issues where you might be hitting something in here. It's just gonna be harder, especially when you're in here. You know, you've got not a lot of room to work with. So something like this does make the job easier. Again, if you're doing it once, you could probably get away without it. But it definitely would be worth the time if you can borrow something like this or use it, but works great. So yeah, drill the pilot hole, then use the hole cutter, spot weld bit, and have at it. All right, so we're gonna drill the pilot hole as explained. And you basically just want to get through that layer of sheet metal enough to locate that pin. And you can switch out. And just be careful you don't go too deep, especially on this upper hump. It's not as big of a deal because it's on top of this other piece of sheet metal, but when you're on this lower one, you don't want to punch a bunch of holes into your body. It's just going to create more work for you later. You can see the center hole from the pilot, and then the little hole saw spot weld drill bit goes around it. So that part is free at that point. It's way easier to get them all drilled out before you try to pop it off, but you can put a screwdriver in there and just move it, make sure you got all the way through and be able to see that. So, time for some time lapse. There you go. I don't know what that funky stuff is, but like somebody ran over Slimer at one point. All right, so first side went way easier. Second side was 100% my fault. If you miss the spot weld, don't get it lined up right. Like it was under the body seam sealer and I just kind of guessed where it was, but I was off about a 1/4 inch, but that's why it was fighting me. Take your time, clean the seam sealer off and see where the spot weld is and not rush like me, it'll go much quicker. But the first side was an example of how to do it. This one was the way to make it way more difficult on yourself, but either way, good lesson for everybody. Here's a close-up. You can see right here is where I drilled. That's where the spot weld was. That's why that was fighting me. And same down here. There's the spot weld. There's where I drilled next to it, but it was covered with the seam sealer. Instead of taking time to scrape it away, I just guessed and see what that got me. All right, so now we got the first layer off. Then we got to work our way around and get this lower layer. Most of these from the upper layer go all the way through. So you might end up having to drill further on a couple of these that were left, but you can see the ones we haven't hit yet that we're gonna have to hit the same way we did the first part. So more time lapse. so in this case right here, like I said before, I drilled in the wrong spot. This spot weld's actually right under here, so I gotta grind that off because you can't get the drill on that little nub. And sometimes these guys, so far I've been able to drill past them. Sometimes you gotta grind these off and the spot weld goes through both layers. So either way, we gotta grind this off so we can keep moving. You can see all these are free now, all the way down. That popping sound is actually a good thing. It means you didn't drill all the way through this layer. You're breaking a real thin layer at the end here, which means you're not gonna have anything to like fill in or whatever. You're just gonna grind these nubs off and then be nice and flat. Yeah, so we got all these done and we're gonna start moving up to the next layer. These get more and more of a pain in the butt when they're upside down like that, but almost 50% done this last piece, so we'll keep rolling. All right, it is out. So this is what we're left with. Hopefully if you do it right, you don't drill all the way through your floor pan and you're left with just these nubs that we had to grind off. And here's your prize for all that hard work. You can throw this on your mantle and just brag to all your buddies how you wasted a couple hours of your life removing this horrible piece of metal. But we're done. I'm sweating my ass off, as you can see. But either way, total elapsed time was probably actually less than an hour. Again, use sharp drill bits. If your hole saw starts to wear out or your spot weld drill, switch it over the other side. You're just gonna fight yourself if you're using dull stuff. So sharp drill bits, sharp spot weld drill, and the rest self-explanatory, just a little bit of grunt. Helps a little bit if you pry out on it as you go, then you kind of see what's still hanging. Sometimes just a touch of it, it'll just keep popping off. It actually comes off pretty easy. So all in all, not as terrible as I said in the beginning, but either way, we got her done. All right, so now it's time to smooth all these bumps off and get rid of all this, get it ready for paint. Now to avoid boring you to tears on this, I'm gonna time lapse this one. All right, so I didn't actually get to do a time lapse on that, but I did grind everything off, and unfortunately I hit the photo button on the old GoPro, so sorry guys, but we're to the point where this is all ground flat, scraped all the seam sealer off, so we're just gonna get it clean and ready for some primer. All right, so we got everything wiped off and we're ready to throw some paint on here. All right, painted and complete. Looks decent. All right, so we got one of the big headaches for this swap out of the way. It's gonna be a wrap for this episode. Next episode, we're gonna dive into clutch master cylinder stuff, which is kind of the next step you need to do before you install the drivetrain. Just makes things a lot easier. So make sure you like, subscribe, and tune in to the next episode. We're gonna get some more stuff done on this project FRS. Thanks.